Hey, y'all, you're listening to the Legacy, Lyrics, and Life podcast. I'm your host, Shawna Wells, your legacy architect. Welcome. This is the podcast where we'll uncover what legacy really means and the impact we can all have when we are present. Let's get started. All right, y'all, I am excited to have David Hardy Jr. as one of our guests today, a good friend of mine, a dad, an all-around pretty clever human, the founder and CEO of All 365 and the co-founder and CEO of Made by Change. And I think I said this already, but a good friend. So hi, David.
Hi, Shawna. How are you?
I'm pretty good. So today we're going to talk about legacy. And I know as we were talking about this conversation today, you were like, but Shawna, what is legacy? And so we're going to start there. What's your definition of legacy?
Such a good question. First, thank you for creating this space. I don't think people stop and realize the power of conversation around legacy or appreciate it as much as you do. And so I thank you for not only appreciating it, but creating the space for conversation. So what is legacy? When we really think about legacy, at least how I think about legacy is, what is it that I would want the people that come after me in my lineage to be able to pick up and run with when my time on this earth in my said body right now is done? And so what is it that I'm leaving behind? What is it that I am providing family, friends, others that is worth holding on to from my lived experience?
As you define it, I'm like, oh, that's heavy. Is there joy in legacy?
I mean, sure. There's a ton of it, especially if you're living it. I feel like if you are constantly trying to find it or in search of it or unclear about what you want your legacy to be, I don't know if there's joy. But I think once you get to this side of clarity and understanding and purpose, there's a sense of liberation that's accompanied with.
Spoken like a man who's been on that journey.
Yeah, it's a long ride. I feel like I just got on the highway. and my car's sputtering, so to be real, I think, yes, I am on a journey. It's been interesting. I've had some points in life where I was just very disconnected from my legacy, and I can't say I'm always every day even still very connected to it, but I think there's been moments in time where I had to really do some deep thought around what my legacy and what I wanted my legacy to be.
Okay, so let's go to those deep thoughts. So how did you figure out what your legacy is or what you're trying to live?
Yeah, I think the second part is a lot more accurate, right? What I'm trying to live. When I went off to college, I had one directive from my dad. He's like, we're not sending you to Colgate University to just get this degree and do some job that doesn't qualify for all this money we're spending, type of thing. And so when I told my dad that I was like, Dad, I think I want to go into education. He was like, you're going to do what? He didn't see the connection between who I wanted to be, how I wanted to show up in the world to the university that I had a chance to attend. And so that was the first rub of how am I understanding my legacy through the eyes of my father's expectations for what my legacy should be, right? So him being a big part of my life, that weighed very heavily on me. And so when I didn't go into economics and Wall Street and all the things that people do once you leave Colgate University with a degree in economics, I decided that I was going to go to South Florida and teach, that became real. But what I found in that first step, I realized part of my legacy, or what I hope is part of my legacy, you tell me if this aligns to the true definition, is that I want to be able to leave a legacy that says to people that you can find the life you want to live that's inside of you. And it's just a matter of finding it and allowing all the other stuff to get out of the way. And so when I got into education, one of the first things I remember from being a teacher in Miami-Dade is that we were in Overtown, which is one of the poorest neighborhoods potentially in the country. We took our kids and we drove them to South Beach to Parrot City or Parrot Island or some kind of, I don't know, some event. And we had to drive over the causeway, and the kids got out of their seats and started looking out at the water, and they're like, wait, the water's so blue. And in my head, I'm like, whoa, y'all live here your whole life about a mile away from this beautiful blue water. And so it made me think about, how do we get people to the other side of themselves? What part of my legacy do I want to align that to helping people find their way?
You said something really poignant there. You said, how do we help people get to the other side of themselves? How did you get to the other side of the self that your father built?
I'm still climbing that wall a little bit still, right? To be honest, I'm not there yet, but thank you for putting me there. what I come to realize, there was a couple moments in my life where I was like, you know what, I could live the life that my father wants me to live. And I think for the most part I have. But I also know there's something more that I wanted to dream and experience. And because of what my parents were able to set up for me, it has allowed me to take chances and dream. And so one of those moments, fast forward to when I left Miami, I took a leap of faith. Like I was very comfortable in Miami. After 5 years, I was teaching. I love my kids, love my community. I took a chance on going to New York City to be a principal. I knew nothing about New York City. I knew nothing about what it meant to lead a school. And the idea that when I got on that plane, still remember leaving Fort Lauderdale's airport for the last time from Miami, I cried like a baby. I just cried because I felt like I was breaking away from an identity and pushing myself to something that I didn't know if was possible. And that was the first moment where I felt like I started to ascend to a place where I felt like I was more myself and living the life that I wanted to lead.
Okay, so take us to the moment just before you get on that plane or as you buy the ticket for the plane, the decision you make to accept that job. What told you that was the thing to do?
I realized what was happening for kids in Miami-Dade County wasn't fair, and I couldn't do enough about it. And I know that sounds probably, I don't know what that sounds like, but in my mind, it sounds as if I'm trying to say that I could have fixed the Miami-Dade County public schools. That is not what I'm implying. But what I'm implying is I attempted to move up and try to be an assistant principal and apply to, kind of get into the pool. And I was met with, great, I'm so excited that you want to be an assistant principal one day, but here is this form you'll fill out to get on the wait list for the AP residency program. And so I was like, in my head, I was like, okay, this is year after year after year of not doing more for the kids I love. Versus Achievement First said, hey, here's a chance to be a school principal of wonderful kids who need leaders tomorrow. And I said, I like tomorrow versus 3 years. And so that was the moment where I realized like this is risky. I mean, but that was the difference for me, realizing that someone believed that I could do something more for kids immediately, and someone else told me I had to wait, be more timely and more wise.
So I hear this like you're confronted with this agitation, right? In your soul, it sounds like I liked tomorrow. And you told us about an earlier agitation, right? Your dad saying one thing, right? Go get that cash, right? Which is like a mantra we've all heard, right? Go get the cash. Those student loans are real. And instead you decide, I'm going to be an educator. And you go, and what I hear you saying is like, I'm ready to make an impact on the world with kids. How can we have them find their own way behind their own eyeballs? So you make this decision to be a principal in AF, and like, listen, like that seems like a badge of honor. And you get tested a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about the tests on the path to ultimately your legacy?
I mean, I ran into a couple things. I think the first roadblock was I wasn't from Brooklyn. When I arrived, people were like, so who are you? And why are you only 28 and trying to tell me you're going to lead a middle school? Right. And so I had all the questions that were kind of thrown at me by parents. And then a few parents on top of that said, this is too rigid. Like what you're trying to do, our kids are, there's no need for all this. And fast forward, I actually agree with a lot of those things now. But I think at the time I was like, no, this is something that's going to take our kids that look just like me, to another level. And it took a while for me to get the buy-in from a number of parents who were just like, I don't know about all this, Mr. Hardy. I don't know if this is all what is necessary. But eventually we got to a better place, and much better place, and still call on some of those parents today. That was the first resistance. The second big resistance was my second year as principal, when we had to double in size. So the first year as principal, it was awesome. We had a great team, and we just had a lot of fun. We loved our kids. Like it was a thing. Like you came to the Little Red Schoolhouse in East New York and you knew you were going to have a fun day. We were going to push you. We were going to make you dream. We were going to, just show you what was possible in the time we had you, and then hit repeat the next day. That was just how we approached it. And it felt so good to be able to wake up and do that every single day. When our staff doubled, kids doubled, it became a little bit harder for that vision to come through every single day. And I felt there was times where I wasn't aligned with that initial push of helping kids find their way. I was dealing with like making sure adults didn't get in the way. So I was spending a lot more time on adult culture than I did with creating the climate and culture in the building I wanted to see. And so that was an interesting moment at AF. The third, which was probably the one that hurt the most, which I haven't shared actually with many people, was I remember distinctly sitting in a room at Endeavor Middle School with the other middle school principals. We were introducing a new suspension policy. And the suspension policy was going to put like any child that had six or more suspensions in a given calendar year, they would be up for expulsion. And I'm the only Black man in this room. And I'm sitting there as I'm hearing the regional superintendent speak to this new policy. I started going through the Rolodex of young Black men that are in my school that, based on the expectations we're supposed to hold across the network and at our school, they wouldn't be there much longer. Specifically, Deshaun kept coming to my mind. Like, that's my boy. Like, I love that kid so much, but he's not going to win the way that this is starting to roll out. And so I expressed my displeasure. And I'm sitting in this room. Again, I'm the only Black man. The other two leaders are white people. And I said, how is that going to help our kids? And I actually got laughed at by one of the principals in the room that I was like too Pollyannish about it. And I'm sitting there like, no, like that's not helping our kids. This policy is not helping our kids. This policy is not helping this room. But I was the lone voice in that space. And that was the moment where I felt the rub up against my legacy of like, am I actually helping people find their way? And right now I felt like I absolutely was not. I was an agitator. I was in that room seen as the outlier. I was the dissenter, which I actually am so comfortable with that now. But at that time, I felt like I was not a part of a team where I had spent most of my life playing on sports teams. So I felt like this was very different. And that was the beginning of the end for me at AF because I felt I was misaligned with their vision and my vision for my legacy.
You said you felt it in your body. Like, where in your body did you feel it? I know I feel agitation like in my heart, my belly.
It was like this aching in my rib cage that was like pulsing. Like I could feel just the contractions of my body just continue to like wax and wane as I was sitting in this room where I felt like the room kept getting smaller and the attention became brighter. And I felt like this rush of blood through my core that was inescapable. Like I didn't know what to do with it. And I was like, yo, like, what am I missing? I remember leaving that room where, of course, the policy went through 3-1. I was the outstanding vote that didn't think this was going to help our kids. And I was on the phone for like 45 minutes with one of my best friends, like just like going through all of it. So I was really thinking like, am I wrong? Maybe I'm missing something. Like all the things that, dominant culture will create into your head to think that you were doing something wrong. And it just was more of me realizing that it just wasn't aligned to how I wanted to show up. These are not my people. This is not my tribe. This is, this is not my community. However you want to frame it, it's just not. And when I feel that level of disconnect at the base of who I am, it's very hard for me to recover.
The thing that you're sharing with us, because so often we're moving through our lives, especially as Black people, moving through our lives, I know I've been guilty of this at many times, working to assimilate, right? I'm told I actually need to hold this title. I need to hold this position. So I got to compromise on what my legacy is in this moment. And we can feel it in our bodies, right? Our ancestors felt all the feels in their bodies. They passed that gift to us and we ignore it. And over time, the cycle becomes that we compromise our health and our well-being. And so this beautiful lesson that you're sharing with us around like, I felt it first in my body. And I knew that something was up on the path to my legacy. And I'm sure you felt that again. Can you share another time where, as you fast forward through your life, that came up for you again?
Yeah, so I say this with a ton of love and a ton of respect for this human being that I'm about to relate to, but also realize that we just have very different approaches towards creating the legacy we wanted to see and what was most important. So I left Achievement First and eventually became Chief Academic Officer in St. Louis, Missouri, and worked for a tremendous man who just retired recently. He was the GOAT in St. Louis. And I learned a ton from him along the way. And I also learned a lot about myself as well. And I knew what I didn't love and I knew what I did. I loved the community of St. Louis and the people there, still do. I love what the kids had to offer. But what I didn't love was that I felt we weren't moving as fast as we needed to the point where we still had chalkboard, like all the things. I'm thinking like, we are not doing everything we need to do for our kids. And when I brought that to the table, and again, I'm now 33 in a state that really values experience and for many good reasons. And I was like, no, we have to move faster. I have ninth graders who can't read. Like, so all these things were running through my head, and it got to a point in my life where I was like I had to speak to my boss and express to him like, yes, this is a lot of progress you've made over time, but there's still a lot of kids that are falling behind. And so I asked for us to do more with our leaders in the summers. So I asked for us to have 2 full weeks of PD or professional development. And eventually I got somewhere in the middle, which was a lot. But then I had like a revolt. Principals, right? So I'm walking around. We had 70 school buildings, 23,000 kids. And I said, if we could just solidify what classroom culture is going to look like, what school culture is going to look like, how we do feedback and provide space for learning, like in our buildings, we would be so much further along. And if we could chip away with that over the summer and set principals up for creating the systems they need to have in place for that to be successful in the school year, I felt it was a win and moves us a little bit closer to reducing the number of kids that were not reading on grade level, let alone not reading at all. However, principals started grumbling a little bit, saying, I could be in my building knowing previous year when I was there, what y'all were doing in your building was nothing, like literally nothing. And since you're here, why can't we find it a good use of your time to prepare for the next week? So met with some resistance, try to work some things out, met with more resistance. And eventually they went to the superintendent over my head and said, look, this is ridiculous that we have to come in here and learn and get better and do better for our schools and all these things. Now, mind you, I'm very biased. I think would have been beneficial, but he eventually came back and said, you have to stop. I have to stop the PD and our professional development. And that hurt. I mean, that hit me in the chest like a ton of bricks because he said it in an auditorium in front of all the leaders, kind of put me on blast in front of all of the leaders in the entire district and kind of rolled me under the bus. I felt very disconnected from him in that moment. We have since healed, I think, but I felt very disconnected from him in the moment. I felt very disconnected from his mentorship that he had provided me so graciously. And I felt that this was not in the best interest of kids, and it wasn't in the best interest of the legacy that I wanted to leave. And it accelerated my path towards leaving St. Louis and bringing me to the next phase of hopefully finding a way to get people to find their own way and getting them to the other side of themselves. But it hurt a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like it hurt.
Yeah, just a little bit.
So you talk about this idea of disconnection. And, I think we're all constantly battling this. Like we say we have an intent in a legacy, right? This is the legacy I want to live and the one I want to leave. And we're faced with these disconnected moments, right? And you're like, I was disconnected from him. What I actually heard you say is, I was disconnected from my legacy. And I had to grapple through that in front of a bunch of people. I know you've had other moments like that. What is another moment where in front of a bunch of people you're grappling through your legacy? Because we all live it, and learning from your wisdom, I think we'd like to do that.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a wisdom, but I mean, here's a lived experience that still pains me, right? So I left St. Louis and eventually became a superintendent. I said, you know what? I learned a lot. I think there's things that could be done differently in a different district, and let me see what happens. Let me see if I could realign myself to my legacy, and more importantly, hopefully create spaces of equitable education for young people that look like me. So I go off to Lorain, Ohio, and lowest performing school district, probably arguably in the country. We had 1% of our kids graduating every single year, college or career ready. 1%. And for most people that hear that are like, what do you mean? You mean like, did you forget, a decimal or something? No, like 1% of a graduating class of 550 kids every year are ready. So we're talking about 5 kids. No business, no organization in this country would survive with some kind of return on that investment at that rate. But I digress. So I jump into this with the intent that we need to transform this district. I felt that was my mandate coming from the governor, the exiting governor, under state legislation. Fast forward, first year was rough. I mean, we were in the newspaper. If you Google my name, you would see all the terrible articles about me and how I'm everything from a dictator to, I mean, you name it. There was something called on me, right? Everyone that I brought in and interviewed, they asked for their resumes because they didn't believe there's that many Black people who could have a master's degree or something. It was just wild how intense it was around the team that was doing really, really good work for kids. And so there came a point in which we finally started to get results for our kids 2 years in. Our achievement gap closing scores went from an F to a B. All the things were trending in the right direction. Our principals were bought in. Our senior leadership team was the best team that I had ever been a part of. And it came a point in which my contract was up for renewal. And I was going to get another 3 years. Things looked really promising. I was excited. It was Martin Luther King Day. We were having a special meeting. The only item on this meeting was for my renewal of my contract. I get a call almost like it was, what is it? Like it was programmed to happen at that time at 12 o'clock exactly on MLK Day, where my chair of the commission said, "We're not going to be able to renew your contract." I'm sitting there like, I mean, I'm dressed. I had like I was fresh. I just got a haircut. Like everything was ready for this day. And I was told that basically what I heard was I was not good enough. This was not the legacy that Lorraine City wants to be led by a black man. First black male superintendent, by the way, of this community to be led this way. And I just, again, cried like a baby. I never felt so rejected. I felt like I had done harm in many ways, and I didn't know how to repair it. But more importantly, I felt like somehow I was letting kids down. When in reality, we all know the situation. I don't think that's what most people would understand. When you get results, you usually get to stay in your job, right? So that hurt. And it hurt because the person who was sending me this news was another black man who I had a ton of confidence in and who I thought had a ton of confidence in me, and had brought me in for exactly what I said I was going to do. I spelled it as everything I was going to do, and I executed on that. And then that was not rewarded, but it opened up conversation more broadly around the pieces of my legacy that I don't think I honored or I understood and how it showed up for me. Right. So I mean, that's one example. I can give you another example, but that was the one example that really hit me. I think where it really like accelerated my thinking around legacy is when we then had a conversation. It may have been before or after this non-renewal conversation, but I had like 200 people in this auditorium. We were talking about some changes we were going to make to improve schools. And at the end of this TV camera comes up and this woman comes towards me. And it looks like it was, again, choreographed to happen on TV. And she's like literally spitting at me as she says, "I demand your resignation. I demand your resignation." I'm sitting there like, wow, this is like, and the meeting was benign. Like it was, nothing came out of it. I don't know what everyone was there for, but there was no show to be seen except for this one at the end of it, where there was a violation of humanity. And I know I played a part in it in some form or fashion, but I couldn't see it. But what I could see is that the legacy that I wanted to live was very different than the experience that I was having right there. I think there was just a reality of like the idea of literally saliva hitting my face and being yelled at by a white woman who did not want me to be in the seat that I was in, not on merit, but just on positionality and what I look like, really helped me reconcile like what is important to me and what I wanted my kids and my kids' kids to understand.
Those are the moments where sometimes our legacy becomes clear, and we have a choice in those moments. We can either succumb to the pressure of them. You're right, I'll change my mind, or I'll go on to do another thing that feels just like this last thing. Or we can choose to redefine, reclarify, and move forward. And it sounds like you did the latter, right? You said, no, this ain't it. And I have an opportunity now to really take the lessons that I've learned about my legacy and start to apply them to a new way of living. So tell us, like, what's one thing that got you from where you were to where you are in alignment with your legacy?
Yeah, it was one of those things where I think getting over the fear that I would never make another dollar in my life or be able to pay for my sneaker, like all the things that I love in life. I don't know why my kids didn't come before sneakers, but that's another conversation. But yeah, so like there was that real fear, like they're gonna wipe me off the face of this earth. Like I was never gonna land anywhere, and ironically, as I was leaving, I had a job offer that was paying me significantly a lot more money, and I was going to do something new. And I didn't know if it was what I wanted to do. I also knew it was something that I needed to try. And the idea of consulting and helping schools and still being tethered to schools indirectly felt right and provided me a space to really learn a lot more about myself and what I really cared about and the impact that I could have. and be where I am today. And so it helped me move to this space of realizing, like, okay, what I feel comfortable with and what I feel empowered to do is go out on my own and figure out how can I best play my part in this world to help people feel better about themselves and get them to a better place. And through that experience, without Ed Elements being in the middle after superintendency, I don't think I would have gotten here. I needed that year to really recenter myself on what was important and what was going to be important after I'm done working, after I'm done being who I am. So I felt that year was critical for me to just create the space to realign myself.
All right. So speaking of your legacy, the definition of legacy, all of the things, tell us what's a lyric that we can go to really feel your legacy?
Kendrick Lamar in Heart Part 5 has this line where he says something to the effect like, we forget about, like, by tomorrow, we forget what remained. And so we start over. And that's actually the problem. And he speaks to our foundation was trained to accept whatever follows. And so I think that speaks to me because we have been put into this space to be trained to believe that how we see things and how things show up is the way things they have to be. And they absolutely do not. And I think we constantly have to agitate and challenge the status quo.
Okay, David, where can we find you if we want to hear more about your lived experience, your path towards legacy, the agitations along the way, the joys? Where can we find you?
You can find me at David Hardy 365 on IG and David Hardy on LinkedIn. But also just go to all-365.com if you want to chat, talk more, or if you want to see some photography. We didn't talk about photography, Generation H photography. I also enjoy.
David, always a pleasure to hang out with you and to hear your stories from the heart. We're excited to see the path to your legacy as you continue to create it. So thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. This has been great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Legacy, Lyrics, and Life. We hope you'll join us on the next episode as we continue to expand and explore life through legacy. If you know someone else who would enjoy this show, be sure to share. Always a pleasure. Until next time.